بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. After talking about different functions of our mind and saying that one aspect of mind is that it's helping us with reasoning, what we call fikr. Then now we want to move on to discussions about whether logic is useful or not useful, and then inshallah whether logic is right or not. So Ayatollah Mutahari starts mentioning some of the objections or problems that people have raised against Aristotelian logic or formal logic. For example, one objection is the first one. If Aristotelian logic were useful, scholars and philosophers who are equipped with this, they have studied, they have learned this, should not have made mistakes or disagreed with each other. Its logic is to save us from mistakes in reasoning. So those who know logic, have studied logic, should not have made mistakes or disagreed with each other. But the reality is that there are mistakes and there are disagreements. This by itself is qiyas istisnai. They use logic because they say if it was useful, they should not have made mistakes, but they have made mistakes, so it's not useful. This is qiyas istisnai. So even if you want to argue against logic, you have to use logic. What's the answer? You say, first of all, to know and to learn does not guarantee that you are actually benefiting from something. Maybe someone knows all the rules and regulations of driving, but still he may not drive carefully and may have accident. Maybe you learn the grammar, but still you may make mistakes. Learning logic is not enough. Using logic is important. Okay? Learning is good because then puts you in a position to use logic consciously. Actually, we said logic is something that we know by our fitrah, but we have to do it consciously. Like you can speak your mother tongue, but if you study grammar, then you become very conscious and careful and you don't make some mistakes that native people may do. So, if scholars have studied logic and still have made mistakes, this is not a problem with logic. The question is whether they have followed and implemented logic or not. For sure, they have not followed and implemented logic with respect to the mistakes which are about the structure and the form of reasoning. But if they have used logic, it has saved them from mistakes about the structure, but logic doesn't deal with the problems in the material that they use. Okay? Because we said always, you have suratul istidlal and maddatul istidlal. There is a form and a structure. You say, Aleph is ba and kullu ba is jim, so Aleph is jim. This is the form. But then when you put Aleph is ba, you should not make mistake. Or when you say Kolloba is Jim, don't put something which is not correct. That's not the problem then with logic. Yeah? We say if you put in this form proper information, you come to the conclusion. Okay? Like we give you a good car. We say if you put right fuel, it can take you to your destination. But if you put wrong fuel, or if you put water inside the tank, it's not going to take you. Is the problem with the car? No. You cannot say this car is not useful because when people put wrong fuel, it doesn't work. This has nothing to do with the car. So, scholars, philosophers who have learned and not used logic, that doesn't pose any problem. Those who have learned and implemented and have made mistakes with respect to the materials, again, doesn't pose any question and threat to logic. Because logic is only for format, for the structure. We say mantiq suri, formal logic. It's not about madde. Although, inshallah, we will talk a little bit about sana'at khams and what type of madde you have to use. But in the end of the day, you have to go and investigate. Logic would tell you, for Burhan, you need this type of materials. For Khitaba, this type. For Jadal, this type. For Mughalata, this type. For Share, this type. But then it is up to you to go and find them. Okay? So, this is the answer to the first question. Is it clear? So the summary is, knowing is not enough, you have to implement it, but even if you implement it, it's for what? For the mistakes which are about form of reasoning, structure, not the materials. Understood? Okay? We can go? Okay. Second problem. This is the objection. They say, it is said that logic is the instrument for sciences. But Aristotelian logic is not a good instrument. Because knowing and applying Aristotelian logic would not add to your information. You cannot use logic to understand what is happening in the world. Can a scientist in laboratory use logic and understand chemistry or physics or biology or medicine? Logic does not help us to understand the world. You need to use induction, istiqra, or tajriba, experiment. You have to experiment means when you do a series of observations or tests and then you come up with a general rule. Our answer to these people is, you didn't, unfortunately, understand what we mean by logic being the instrument for sciences. What we mean by logic being instrument is not that it's the only instrument. It means that it's a measure. If I tell you that this is the measure, by this you can weigh. I say, for example, if you want to make a dress, use this measure to make a dress which is fit, not too short or too small. Then you come after a few days, you say, no, I use this measure, but I don't have proper dress. I say, why? He said, because the measure didn't give me any dress. I said, this is not to give you dress. Did you buy the dress? Did you tailor the dress? Said, no, I just use this. We didn't say all the problems of the world will be solved by logic. We said this helps you with avoiding certain types of mistakes, even not all types of mistakes, certain types of mistakes. Okay? Plus, you say we need in sciences istiqra, induction or experiment, tajriba. Even istiqra is what is mentioned in mantiq, in logic, because we said there are three types of istidlal: al-qiyasu, wal-tamthilu, wal-istiqra. So if you have problem with qiyas, why you are attacking logic? If you want to say qiyas is not enough, induction is not enough, why you say logic is bad? Logic is telling us you have three types of istidlal and tells us what is the case for which you can use each of them, what are the requirements. Logic doesn't force you to use qiyas in science, for example, all the time, or to use istiqra in philosophy. Logic is a general science that gives you idea about how to form arguments. These arguments in different disciplines, different sciences can be different. Sometimes can be from kulli to juz'i, like qiyas. Sometimes it's juz'i to juz'i, it's tamthil. Sometimes it's juz'i to kulli, it's istiqra. So, if you have problem with qiyas, then don't use it in the wrong place. Plus, there is something that we cannot explain it very much here, inshallah, in more detailed philosophical books. Something that Ibn Sina has explained and other philosophers, that actually tajriba, that in sciences are used, even empirical sciences, involves some kind of qiyas. Because, as I said sometime before, if 100 times you test something, still you cannot make a general law. Suppose in your city or in different cities you have, tested different types of water. So different cities, different types of water, and they are all boiling at 100 centigrade degree. But how can you generalize? Maybe if you go to a place that is further north, further south, east, west, would be different. Or maybe up to this time it has been like this. Maybe tomorrow is different. How can you say tomorrow is not different? If someone tells you all the tests that you have done are for the past, maybe tomorrow, next week, next year, water changes. How do you answer? What do you say? No, how do you answer? If a scientist is asked, for example, you are producing some medicine. You say, okay, have you tested this medicine? Said yes. We said, on what samples? He said, I had various samples, people, different age, different gender, different ethnicity, all have worked, even if they have done this. We say, what's the guarantee that's going to work next month? What do they say? Here they have to bring some unempirical argument. For example, the principle of uniformity, that in the nature, in different times, we would have uniform patterns. So if something has been up to now like this, in future also will be like this. But this is something that you cannot understand it or prove it with experiment, because all our experiments are about past and present. So even scientists, knowingly or unknowingly, they are using some principles which are intellectual, are rational, not empirical. Okay? So there is qiyas there. So if there has been success in sciences, it's not because they have rejected qiyas. No, they have used qiyas, but also they have used observation and experiment. Everything in its own place. If when you are supposed to do empirical work, you don't do empirical work and think. You know, there is a story, they say that in medieval ages, there was a big debate about the number of the teeth for the horse. So different people had debates that how many should be the number of the teeth. And they were philosophically, theologically challenging each other. But they were not going and counting. In some of the books, I don't know how true it is, but it's mentioned in some books. It has become an example for misusing qiyas. Okay? Sometimes we have to go and ask, we have to go and see, we have to go and test. You cannot solve all the problems by philosophical arguing. Okay? You cannot sit in a library and plan everything that is needed to be done in the society. You have to know when rational reasoning is important, where empirical reasoning is important, where mathematical reasoning is important. Everything in its place. If you say we don't need intellectual reasoning, this is wrong. If you say we don't need empirical reasoning, it's wrong. Everything in its own place is needed. The third problem, they say in Aristotelian logic, the main strength is where? In qiyas. The greatest strength is in qiyas. And then they say qiyas has two premises. For example, in qiyas iqtirani, we have sughra and kubra. Yeah? But it's not leading to any benefit. Why? Because if you know these two premises, you are not learning anything new. So Socrates is a human being, and every human being is mortal, so Socrates is mortal. Socrates. You know Socrates is a human being? Yes. You know every human being is mortal? Say yes. Okay, so then you understood everything. So what's the benefit of putting these together and say Socrates is mortal? The answer is we know Socrates is a human being, and we know every human being is mortal. But we were trying to understand what's the relation between Socrates and mortal. Yeah, because once proposition has had the asqar and had the mushtarak, minor term and middle term. The other one has middle term and major term, had the akbar. Then when you put this together and this middle goes away, then you know what's the relation between these two. Ayatollah Mutai says, like, for example, having a father and mother and then having a child. Child has something from mother and something from father. You cannot say because everything in the child comes from father and mother, then we don't need mother and father. Or we don't need to have both of them. One of them was enough. The next problem. They say if two premises are correct, the conclusion is correct. If the two premises are wrong, the conclusion is wrong. Then what's the point in studying logic? If two propositions are right, you will have a good result. If they're wrong, you don't have a good result. What's the benefit? The answer is, who said if two propositions are correct, the answer is correct? You have to observe requirements of each type of istidlal. Sometimes both premises can be correct, but people make false conclusion. For example, A is B. Jim is also B. But this doesn't mean A is Jim. Yeah? Like, al-insan haywanun. Al-farasu haywanun. But you cannot say insan is faras. So sometimes both premises can be correct, but the conclusion is wrong. So you have to study logic. The next problem is that, okay, logic at most can help us to avoid mistakes in a structure and format of reasoning. What about the materials? Formal logic has nothing about this. So they use this example. Say, suppose it's winter, very cold, and there are two doors. If you want to be saved, you have to close both doors. Logic helps you to close one door to mistakes. And these are those mistakes which come from the format of the reasoning. But because you don't have the ability to close the other door to mistakes, which is mistakes for materials, the madde. So what's the benefit? If you are going to be dying, na'uzubillah, because you are going to be frozen, does it make difference whether two doors were closed, were open, or one door was open? If you are going to die anyway, so why you should waste your time by closing one door? No, suppose you are in a room, it's very cold, one door is not there. One door is missing. There is a door for the other entrance and you can close it. Now you want to close this one, the other one, there is no door. What's the answer? The answer is, we want to do our best to prevent mistakes. We don't say it's enough to close one door. No, you have to try to close both doors. But because logic cannot close both doors, shouldn't I at least close the door to that type of mistake by logic and then try to close the other door by observing requirements for materials? I have to do both. Why you say either you get 100% from this or there is no point? There is point. It can help you with respect to certain types of mistakes completely. And then for another type of mistake, you go to another solution. Now, we move on to the next lesson in the book about the problems which are raised by people who say logic is not only not useful, they say it is false. It's not valid. Some people may say it's valid but not useful. Yeah? For example, someone is dying out of hunger, and you start teaching him mathematics. This is not wrong, but this is not useful. Yeah? You cannot say this is wrong, but this is not useful. So the problem with the first group of objections was they say it is not useful. Now these people want to say it's not valid. It's false. Okay? They don't believe in logic. Yes. For example, the first objection is this. So logic can also open the door sometimes. So, the first objection, they say main value of logic is dependent on qiyas. Qiyas is very important part of logic. And most of the qiyas which is used is qiyas iqtirani. So the most important part of logic is qiyas, and the most important type of qiyas is qiyas iqtirani. Do you remember what is qiyas iqtirani? What is qiyas iqtirani? The conclusion is halfly mentioned in Suqra and halfly in Kubra. But in Qiyas Istisna'i, conclusion is mentioned completely in the one of the two premises. Okay. So, the most important part of mantiq is Qiyas. The most important type of Qiyas is Qiyas Iqtirani. Qiyas Iqtirani has four types. The most important one is Shakl Awwal, first form. Okay? But first form is a vicious circle. You say every human being is an animal, and every animal is a jism, is a physical body. So every human being is jism. How did you know every animal is jism? And how did you know every human being is haywan? Either you knew it by knowing every human being is jism, which means a vicious circle, or you didn't know every human being is jism. So if you didn't know human beings are jism, why you said all animals are jism? If you knew all the animals are jism, it means that you knew human beings are jism. Otherwise, you shouldn't have said all animals are jism. It's similar to the problems we said before. This is the actually question which was raised by Abu Sa'id Abul Khair. Abu Sa'id Abul Khair was a Sufi master. Yeah, he had a discussion with Abu Ali Sina. It is said that they met in Nayshabur, the city of Nayshabur. They met, and he asked this question. Ibn Sina answered this question. Ibn Sina said, this is not a vicious circle. You may know every human being is jism and still not know you may know every animal is jism, but may not know every human being is jism. Why? Because the way to understand every animal is jism is not necessarily through istiqra. If it was istiqra, means you have to go and check all animals, including human beings, And when you see all animals, including human beings, are just, then you can say, كل حيوان جسم. But sometimes we can understand this without استقراء. You can understand it from a deductive approach. Okay? For example, we say كل حيوان جسم نام حساس متحرك بالإرادة. So كل حيوان is جسم. You don't need to go and check. What you need is to prove that human beings are animals. Otherwise, we know animals are جسم. So, Ibn Sina said to Abu Sa'id Abu al-Khay, this is not vicious circle, and what we know in premises is not coming from our knowledge of the conclusion in advance. Or in other words, sometimes we may have a knowledge about the conclusions, but in a hidden way, not in an articulate way. So indirectly, we knew that all animals are just, and human beings are animal, but we were not conscious of it. We were not, explicitly aware of it. So this is not though. Another problem. Aristotelian logic is mostly based on qiyas. And qiyas means that you come from kulli to juz'i. Yeah, you apply a general rule to particular cases. So in qiyas, our journey is nuzuli. Yeah, means we come down, we descend from kulli to juz'i. Okay? But they say this is wrong. According to, they say, of course, we don't accept, but they say according to psychology, especially psychology of knowledge and studies which have been done, they say we go from juz'i to kulli, not from kulli to juz'i. And the answer is, again, as we said, we have three types of istidlal. We have kulli to juz'i, we have juz'i to kulli, and we have juz'i to juz'i. All these three types are valid if they are used properly. But in qiyas, it can produce certainty. In istiqra, it can produce certainty if you can do istiqra kamil. For example, if you want to say all birds have some quality based on istiqra, you can only say this if you can investigate all birds, which is very difficult. You can say all people in this room I checked and they have this quality. This is istiqra kamil, but the extent is very limited. Yeah? Or we can say all people in this city have this medical problem. It's possible because we can go and investigate. But if you want to say all people of the world, it's very difficult, but it's still possible. But if you want to say all people in all ages have been like this and are going to be like this, how can you say that? So istiqra, if it is kamil, it's bringing certainty. But it's very difficult to have inclusive istiqra when you are talking universally. If you say all the elephants are like this, it's very difficult. You have to go and check every elephant in the world, even the elephants in the past, elephants in the future. So, tamsil also, we said, is something that can be used, but you must be careful. In tamsil, if you can prove that they are really similar in the cause for the judgment, like qiyas mansus al-illa in fiqh, which is logical tamsil, you can then understand the case with the other one. Otherwise, you cannot be sure. Just because two things are similar, you cannot say what is for this one is proved for the other one, unless you can add additional qiyas to it that these two share the same quality. So, in logic, we have different types of istidlal. For each of them, we have clear guidelines. We know their limits. We know their extent that they can work. And we don't misuse and misplace them. Another objection, they said in Aristotelian logic, I need your attention. Your attention is here. In Aristotelian logic, they say it's always a matter of inclusion. So, you say Aleph is ba, ba is jim. So Aleph is jim. So Aleph is ba is going inside ba is jim. Inclusion. Endiraj. In Arabic, inclusion, insertion. But they said there is another type of reasoning, which is, they think, it's not addressed in Aristotelian logic. What is that? Musawat. Like what? Aleph, for example, if you are talking about, different angles of a figure, we say Aleph is equal to B, and B is equal to Jim. So Aleph is equal to Jim. But this is not Indiraj. It's Musawat. Why it is not Indiraj? Because Hadd Wasat is not repeated. You say Aleph is equal to B. You didn't say what is equal to B is equal to Jim. So Aleph is equal to Jim. You say Aleph is equal to B and B is equal to Jim. You understand the difference? So they say this is a type of argument which has not been mentioned in Aristotelian logic. But Ayatollah Mutahari says, actually, at least Muslim logicians have addressed this. They call this qiyas al-musawat, and they have shown how this goes back to the normal qiyas that we have. Like, for example, when you say Aleph is equal to B, okay, then you say B is equal to Jim. Then you can say everything which is, if B is equal to Jim, so Jim is also equal to B, and then you can use equal to B as the common term. Okay, Aleph is equal to B. Equal to B is Jim. Because when B is equal to Jim, Jim is also equal to B, so you can use both ways. So you say Aleph is equal to B, and equal to B is Jim, so Aleph is equal to Jim. So there is no problem. So it's not an unknown discovery that you have made. He mentions another problem that he says in philosophy they have addressed this, but he doesn't mention the answer, so we don't need to go into that. Also, he says Aristotelian logic is based on concepts which are general, mafahim kulli. You know, you saw many times we said that it has to be kulli. Even when it is juz'i, the mafhum is kulli. Even if you say ba'dul insan haywan, but these mafahim are kulli. Yeah, you understand the difference? When you say ba'dul haywan insan, but haywan and insan are kulli. The concept is general. But they say, we know that every concept in our mind is juz'i. The answer is not mentioned here, but you know the answer. Every concept is juz'i if you look at it itself as a mental quality, as a mental existence. But every concept is like also a mirror that reflects something else. So for example, concept of apple in your mind, the concept of apple is kulli or juz'i? If you look at it itself as a concept is one, but it's a mirror for millions of apples. So it's kulli. When we say concepts are kulli, we don't look at them as such. We look through them. It's the difference between hamla awwali and hamla shayya. If you look at the concept, say, okay, this concept is my mind, and it is juz'i. But if you look at what the concept is showing, this concept can be applied to many, many cases. لا يمتنع صدقه على كثير. So it is kulli. Another problem is that they say Aristotelian logic is based on hoviyat. Means it's based on everything being itself. While people like Hegel, they have said, and also we have in the process philosophy. I don't know if you have heard process philosophy of people like Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead. He has the idea that everything is in the process of becoming a new thing. Even some of them say God is also changing. They say even God is changing. So they say in logic of Aristotle, you say something is this, but in this approach of Hegel and Whitehead, you can never say something is like this. Everything is becoming different. But again, we say this is not an acceptable objection, because first of all, it's not the case that everything is changing. Actually, you cannot understand change unless there are fixed things. It's a very important thing, we don't want to discuss this now, but remember, put it down somewhere. There cannot be change unless there is something fixed by which you can measure. If everything is changing, even change is changing, then you cannot understand change. Or when you say everything is changing, this by itself is changing or not? If you say this is also changing, so maybe then everything is not changing. If you say no, everything is changing, is not changing, then we say there is an exception. So why you say everything is changing? So there can be fixed things, and those fixed things can be used to build upon them. Another problem is they deny the principle of contradiction. Principle of contradiction. In English, they say principle of contradiction. In Islamic logic and philosophy, say imtina or naqizain, impossibility of contradiction. We say impossibility of contradiction. So some people have said, like, Marxists, they say there is no problem in contradiction. But we say they have not understood, or maybe they have a misunderstanding. Because this is the foundation. This is the mother of propositions. Ummul qadaya. If A is B at the same time, from the same perspective, you cannot say A is not B. Otherwise, anything that you say opposite to it also can be true. So you say Aristotelian logic is not good, so Aristotelian logic is good. You say you understand what you say, it means you don't understand what you say. So you cannot accept the implications. Okay, we have one more lesson, inshallah, about Sana'atul Khams. This is the part in Mantiq al-Suri which deals with materials. Okay? The 5 arts, the 5 disciplines, 5 techniques. Sana'at is the plural for sana'at. In Greek language, they had arche. Arche is what we say art. And we say arts. And arts, doesn't mean like, for example, painting and, this type of things necessarily. These are fine arts. Al-fununul jamila. Or in Farsi we say hunarhay ziba. Otherwise, fan in Arabic or arts in English or hunar in Farsi is more general. Means a kind of science. You have, faculty of arts, but in faculty of arts you have, like literature, you have psychology. So arts is not the same as fine arts, okay? So there are 5 types of funun, or arts, or general disciplines that logicians have recognized. They say these are 5 different types, and for each of them you can use certain types of qadaya, propositions, depending on what is your purpose. Do you want to prove something certainly? Then you have to use burhan, demonstration. Burhan is when not only the form is certain, the materials, the mawadul qiyas are also certain. They have to be yaqini. So inshallah we will talk about this, and we say, what are yaqiniyat? What are certain propositions that can be used if you want to perform burhan? But sometimes you don't want to prove 100%. You want to argue with someone. They call this jadal. In jadal, sometimes you can use something that the other person accepts, even if it is not yet proved. Or maybe you yourself don't accept. But he has a position and he insists on his position, and you see if you want to form burhan is taking time, so you use something that he himself accepts. No, that's different. That's different. That's another meaning of judgment. Sometimes you don't need to prove 100%. You are not also arguing with someone. You want to persuade people. For example, I want to encourage you to give charity. Here I may not use burhan. I may use khitaba. Khitaba doesn't mean to give a speech. Khitaba means a type of reasoning that a khatib, for example, may use, but also other people may use, that is aiming at encouraging people or discouraging people from doing something, persuading them. Okay? For example, for khitaba, you can use mashhurat. You can use proverbs. You can use poems. Yeah? Of course, an alim, even when he is doing khitaba, he doesn't say anything wrong. You know? But some people may use this method to persuade people, or may say something which is not wrong but is not proved. Mashhurat. Inshallah, we will talk about it. For example, in every culture, every language, there are lots of proverbs, lots of wise sayings that people accept, but maybe they are not proved. Maybe they have exceptions, but people say and get the result. Sometimes it's more to work on maybe emotions and exciting and like poem. Poem, of course, can be a wise poem, can be based on hikmah, but sometimes poets just say things and some poets, not everyone. Quran says, "Ash-shu'ara yattabi'uhum al-ghabun." Some shu'ara just they play with words and they influence you. Sometimes it's mughalata. They try to misguide you. They try to deceive you. Or maybe even they themselves are unaware, unconscious. But they use false things. So in debates, sometimes people may do this. You have to be careful. So these are 5 types of they call arts or disciplines, and inshallah in the next session we will talk about them, and then this will finish our introduction course. After that, inshallah, we go to the intermediate level. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin.